Welcome to the podcast where we take a deep dive into the stories behind construction business leaders. We will share how they got started, how they found success, and the lessons learned along the way. I'm your host, Eric Fortenberry. Welcome to Builder Stories. Welcome back, everybody. Today, I am really excited. I have got a very dynamic duo here. We've got a father and a son-in-law who are coming together, going to work, building their company. So I've got Jeff Whitted and Ryan Stones. They work together at Aslan Design Build. They're located in Sellersville, Pennsylvania. Really excited to have you guys on the show today. Welcome to Builder Stories.
Great to be here.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you guys, maybe we'll start with Jeff here. Give us the backstory. I mean, how did you get into construction? What led you to start this business? Kind of what's the main focus?
Well, basically, I went to college to learn to draw cadavers. I wanted to be a medical illustrator, and I changed my mind after a number of art programs, and I was paying my way through school. So I worked with a carpenter for 2 years, and then the last 2 years, I worked for a painting contractor. I finished college. I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do. So my brother-in-law, right outside Philadelphia, had started an upholstery business. And so I joined that. And the next thing I knew, I was learning how to tie springs and do tufting. And we would upholster walls for the Four Seasons. We did a lot of nightclubs. And so I basically became an upholsterer. And then this artistic part of me was like, well, I just don't want to sit at a bench or, on site upholstering. So and I started learning window treatments. And then I started actually doing work for other interior designers. And I started thinking, I can do this. And then I started teaching myself faux finishes, which I did for about 12 years, wood grain, marbleizing, and so forth. And I soon began to realize that I had the aptitudes for doing this work. So I'd kind of come through a little bit of carpentry trade, a little bit of painting trade, a lot of upholstery, and a lot of window treatments. And so by the time I got to 98, so at this point I was like 13 years in business, I did my first kitchen remodel. And I've always been the type of person which, if I don't know how to do it, I'll still take the job and then I'll just figure it out. And so this first kitchen was an old home down in Philly that had 16-inch thick stone walls, 3 stories high. And we actually tore out a 16-foot section of wall, put a steel beam in to make the kitchen larger. And I had no idea how to do that, but I just got someone that knew how to do it. So fast forward, I started, what I found is that a lot of people out there, they don't know who to call to have work. And if you're working for people who are professionals, they don't have the time to try to figure out to do the work. So I would start having people ask me questions like, do you know a roofer? Do you know someone that could put a new electric panel box in the house and this and that? I thought, this is, I don't want to lose the opportunity to make some money. So yeah, sure, we can do that. And we did it. So we increasingly moved towards more and more build stuff. And what I realized, because we were Aslan Interiors, since I incorporated on my own in 85, we were Aslan Interiors, and I realized that we actually were doing design build, and everybody and their brother seemed to be hanging that shingle out because it was sort of a popular concept. I thought, we're really doing this. And I like to tell people we do footers to fabrics because during the 80s and the 90s, when I was doing the window treatments and the upholstery, I was starting to do interior design as well, the carpet, pick the colors and whatnot. And I was training my daughter. So I eventually was able to join ASID as an allied member. And so we kind of just kept doing the building and the design. And then Ryan married my 4th daughter. We have 8 kids. And Brittany is a few years older than Camille, who Ryan married. And she's an allied member of ASID as well. She kind of grew up in the business. And so then enter Ryan 7 years ago. Take it away, Ryan.
Take it away. Thanks, Pops. Try not to call him Pops in front of clients, but it comes out. But anyway, yeah, so I'm Ryan, and I came into the business kind of in a much different trajectory. I didn't come through the trades. I actually came from a nonprofit Christian ministry of all things. Jeff, at the time, 7 years ago, needed help in the office. I need help with project management, implementing some systems. So in sort of a um, backdoor way, that experience working for the nonprofit, raising my own funds, I kind of almost ran a mini small business for my ministry. And so, I was doing all sorts of crazy stuff. I was doing the marketing, I was doing, um, managing projects, doing the work, planning, all this kind of stuff. And really, it was kind of exactly the skill set that the company needed. Somebody to come in and really help organize things, help to run things, start new initiatives, really help the company grow, and professionalism, excellence, just to do better what Jeff had done for years and years, but to kind of take to the next level. So, I didn't necessarily think I would be there when I first started long term. But eventually, when the option to kind of do something else or do this, I'm like, I'm going to stay with Aslan. And it's been a good time. I'm really very thankful to have jumped on board. Some of my favorite things that we've done is just implementing those systems. So JobTread's one of them. We just started about a year ago, but even before that, we were using a couple other different systems in our tech stack. Asana for project management, using a lot of like Google Sheets and that kind of thing. So we were really pumped about a year ago, as we were thinking, through, hey, how can we build for the next season? And particularly as Jeff and I were working through the succession plan, whereby I'll take over in the next 10 years or so. One of the key things was we need to get, some better software in there. And so that's where JobTread came in. So yeah, that's a little bit of my story. I did become, after starting with not much experience, we were doing a ton of kitchens and baths. It was the bread and butter of what we did. And eventually, after about 4 or 5 years of doing it, I'm like, wow, I'm starting to know what I'm doing. Like, what is this? And so I looked into the NKBA's certification for a certified kitchen and bath designer, and I was shocked that, wow, I'm actually qualified to do this. So I took the tests and found I pretty much knew everything already, just from learning on the street, as it were, like doing kitchens under Jeff's leadership and guidance and expertise. Learned a ton, and then the coursework was really helpful in kind of polishing that off for me. And so now, I'm every kitchen and bath design comes through through across my desk. So I'm doing all the drawings. Jeff is overseeing and guiding things, but we really work hand in hand to make sure these kitchens and baths especially are great designs, tight. They're functional, they're beautiful, that kind of thing. So that's a little bit of my story.
And that's that's quite the interesting story there. You guys had mentioned earlier you had an interesting journey to get here, but yeah, I mean, Jeff, from cadavers to upholstery to windows and painting, and I mean, I love how you describe it. From footings to fabric. I mean, that truly is the the full circle, full process there. That's quite the story there. And I mean, eight kids. Sounds like it's been a family business the whole time. You've had lots of involvement, and super awesome to have Ryan here coming and joining you. I mean, I find a lot of times some of the best businesses get built when you can have both the person who just really understands the trades and the construction side of the house, and then also having that strength on the business side, the processes, operations, being able to build something that can operate very efficiently, and leveraging all the latest technologies, marketing tools, techniques, strategies. Sounds like you guys have got a really good kind of combination partnership going on
Well,
here.
well, something which I want to stress. So I'm 68, and so I'm hoping to work till I'm 78. And when Ryan came to me 7 years ago, because remember, I would sell $100,000 and $200,000 projects by hand sketching. Not even color. I would hand sketch, and I would sell these projects. And Ryan came to me and he said, "Listen," he goes, "there's some things that I want to do because I'm younger. I'm very technical in how I think about things." And I realized that if the business was going to grow, I needed to trust him, not be afraid of the technology. And I'm not the greatest with technology. I do like JobTread. I do understand it somewhat. Let's say I understand it well enough. But the thing is, younger people, like Ryan has done with me, they will work around the systems so older folks like us can be comfortable. I can't stress enough how, like, if you're out there and you're thinking about bringing in younger people that want to change maybe how you do what you do, um, it's probably a really good thing, and you probably should let them.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see, there can have a tendency for like kind of just resistance to change, and
Oh, yeah.
hear all the time. Well, we've been doing it that way for the last 3, 4 decades. Like, why would we change? Why would we do anything different? But it sounds like you might have kind of been in that camp until Ryan came along, and I mean, so what, when you're looking kind of back at the last few years when Ryan's been able to really help you modernize the business. I mean, sounds like it's been a no brainer. To be able to get that fresh perspective and adapt to the times.
Well, here's something. So, Ryan and I've had a lot of conversations about, how do we want to grow our business? What's our ideal project? Because, I mean, we'll do addition, house remodels. I have clients where we're just doing interior design, the furnishings and finishes and such. But if you really seek to be creative, if you really seek to kind of set yourself apart from a lot of other people who are doing what you're doing, you've got to be a good problem solver, right? But a lot of creativity really helps. So the creativity actually complicates the business. I mean, if you think about, we're lining up a guy to dig the footers, and we're figuring out what the size of the drapery treatment's going to be, and the size of the area rug, and everything in between. And what we have found is Job Tread, by far, has been the best system to keep track of all that. So what that means is more profitability. It means less stress for Ryan. I've seen Ryan's stress level go down like this. The more he gets into Job Tread, his stress goes down. The profitability goes up. And what it does, it actually frees me up to be more creative. And I like to think I'm getting even better, even at my age of 68, that I'm even getting better on this plane, because something like Job Tread gets rid of a lot of the noise.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, Ryan, I'm curious from from your perspective. I mean, obviously, coming into this with your father-in-law, you married his daughter, you got some sort of family, personal dynamics at play. But what was it like to, to help kind of get him to, adopt this technology? I mean, obviously, we heard that he was, not super comfortable, and may have been hesitant and pushing back a little, early on. Like, how did you navigate that?
Honestly, I would say it's been easy. I think, even to say that he's pushing back is like, it's like an over exaggeration. I think the only thing is, there's this idea of like technological natives versus technological immigrants. I mean, I grew up with a computer in my house, whereas, Jeff didn't. So, so I think some of it is just, um, number one, I think he has the humility to say, yeah, you know what? That's not going to be my strength. So I want to get the systems that we need, but, I want to work within that system, but, I have limitations. I'm just not going to be able to use it, as quickly or effectively, as say I could, or someone in my generation. Anyway, I think the huge thing is just that character of humility to kind of know yourself, and I mean, we can all benefit from that in different areas. I mean, there's things that I just, don't have me do that, have Jeff do that, because it'll stress me out, or whatever. I mean, Jeff is just a master with the design, connecting with people. Even if there's problem solving stuff, like just the 40 years of experience and knowledge, like he just can really handle things really well. So yeah, I mean, honestly, there wasn't pushback from him. I think that the hardest thing was just, implementing the system, figuring out the best way to use it. Um, we've taken advantage of, other help too. We've got, admin assistants that help us, and, help kind of use the job tread systems. And again, it's all about freeing up Jeff to kind of do what he does best. He shouldn't be sitting in front of a computer doing admin work, right? Um, only what's necessary. Like, he should be out, with people, designing things, solving problems, face to face with people. So, let him do that, and then I'll handle the interior stuff. I'll work with the admin assistant or other project management and design staff to handle those kind of things.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense, and I think just like what you described. I mean, some of the most successful, best leaders out there are the ones who can set their ego aside and say, "Hey, I know that I need to learn something new, and I want to adopt and adapt to the times, and like how can we be more efficient, and really like having that in depth understanding of here's kind of what I'm comfortable with, here's sort of where my boundaries are, what can you do to help get this implemented. I mean, that's a sign of a very great leader and somebody who's genuinely putting the business ahead of their own personal, beliefs on, whether they like technology, hate technology, want to use it or not use it. I think that you said it really well there. I mean, that's a great, lesson for everyone out there to just always remember that, there are new techniques, new things that come along that like you got to keep kind of learning and being open-minded to if you want to be able to adapt with the times. And, I think that's what keeps everything healthy and keeps the business growing. And just like you said, I mean, it sounds like you guys really understand yourselves and your own kind of strengths and weaknesses, and have done a good job defining sort of your lanes, and what is the best use of each of your time, and how do you really maximize the value that you can add to the business. And yeah, sitting behind a computer is not the best use of Jeff's time, but he's been afforded the opportunity to go and do what is the best use of his time because you've been able to come in here and help, build out the systems, the processes. You've kind of got the operation in a better place where it doesn't need to have Jeff, doing all that stuff every single day. He can be out focused on the customers and the actual build. And so I think it sounds like you guys really have formed a great partnership here that I think, a lot of people sort of struggle with kind of navigating, okay, who's going to do what and how should we kind of run this together? It sounds like there's a lot of trust between you to really implement and execute.
Yeah, you said stay in your lane. I feel like Jeff and I, we talk about that like every day. Uh, 'Cause we want. I mean, it's there's so many dynamics to that. So it's Jeff staying in his lane, me staying in mine. It's even our our trade partners and suppliers. Like, what lane do they have? And for our customer and their particular project, like what are the lanes that are part of their project, and who do we want to put in them? Maybe we. And that's part of our task as designers as well, is understanding and what is that lane, and how do we get the right solution there. We might design this awesome custom cabinet for them, but they actually need to be more in like a factory made, more simple thing because of their budget. So um anyway, yeah, staying in the lane, it's so key on so many levels.
Well, the thing too, like one of those lanes is like we always tell clients that, look, I have two hands. My left hand is your budget. My right hand is the design process. So working with Ryan, our lanes do join, and there again, job tread kind of just helps us keep track of how much we're spending and like how we doing on the budget. Okay, I can splurge a little bit on this selection end because we're still kind of in the range. And it's a constant back and forth of budget design. You know, so and something too for the success is that Ryan and I know that we're not perfect people by far, and we both really try to own it when we screw up. And if we need to tell each other, hey, you know what, I was impatient, I'm sorry, or I was kind of cranky today because I'm on a cleanse, I'm sorry, whatever. But we have that in the family, right? And we just keep it consistent in the work relationship. And when we hire people, it's very important that they have that same culture. So, the employee can feel free to like, hey, you're training me, but I feel kind of overwhelmed. And, it's like they're free to talk to us. It's all about being approachable because we want our clients to feel that we're approachable, you know? And,
It's such a great point. I mean, I think that that really communication, is probably one of the things I hear the most. It just like it really it can translate, from your personal family life directly to, the business with your employees, with your clients. Like, if there's any one skill that anyone could develop to become a better, person, it's the ability to communicate and to, just kind of have those even those hard conversations where, you got to just, if you come in, hot and heavy and just get that other person on the defense, like this isn't going to be a productive conversation. It's about coming in, making sure now's the right time, and sort of having that kind of that the goal of diffusing and making amends and rebuilding so that you can continue to move forward, in the best kind of possible manner. And sounds like that maybe that family, love and trust and relationship has helped to kind of bring that into the business where now it's really kind of part of the culture, which is great. I mean, I couldn't agree more. Like I want all of my employees to also feel like, they can come in and talk to me about anything, and that there's, who cares what titles are and roles and, who's in the corner office. It's about making sure people feel comfortable in having those conversations. And, I think when you do that, you build a very strong culture that will continue to build and help, the company, go through the good times and the bad times.
Right. And if I could add one other thing. So I was raised by my father, do the right thing, even to your own hurt. And when we deal with clients, because, you always hope that you just get the great client, but sometimes you get someone who's, you wish kind of maybe you weren't working for them after you're halfway into the job. But what I have found over the years is that problems happen. A vendor messes up, I make a mistake on something, stuff just happens. Materials come in short or they're damaged or whatever. And owning it and just looking someone in the eye and taking responsibility for it and then making it right. Oh, you know what? The paint got mixed the wrong color. We just paid a painter $1,500 to paint this room. It's our fault. I'm not going to argue with the client, try to talk them into liking it. No, you know what? Our bad. We'll make it right. And when those things happen, unfortunately, they don't happen a lot. But I've found, generally speaking, unless somebody is a really difficult person, but most people, when you go through something like that and they see that you do the right thing, that actually makes the bond and the loyalty even stronger with that client.
Absolutely. Sometimes it does take a little bump in the road to really kind of help everyone see, what's under the hood, kind of who are these people really? Do they genuinely care? Do they do what they say they're going to do? And, I think it is those little moments, those are opportunities to truly show, your who you are, and that builds your reputation that will, precede this job and this client. I think that's one of the most important things. And I tell people all the time too, like you got to honor your word. If you screwed up, then, own it and take care of it and make it right, because, one little hiccup, one dipping into that profit, for this one job. I mean, that's very short-sighted when you try to kind of go back and squeeze, and turn it on them somehow or another. It sounds like you guys really do, kind of have that, again, that long-term, vision here, which is, again, it's you're already thinking about a 10-year, succession plan. And, obviously you've been in this since 19, I think 85, so it's about seeing the much bigger picture and, leading by, kind of with your core values and who you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious, can you kind of give us a little breakdown of like, what's the total team look like today?
So Jeff's the CEO, lead designer. I'm kind of the chief of operations. And I do all the financial admin stuff as well. And then we've got two guys that are project manager estimators that just started in the last year. So they're part of the trajectory of Jeff and I looking to the future, growing over the next 10 years. It's to bring people in under us to train them up to do the work. So one started in September. His name is also Jeff, which is a little confusing. We're still trying to figure it out. And then we got another guy, Nate, who started in January. And so that's our full-time crew. We're really small. We're lean and mean, as we like to say. But we're getting it done. We're having a lot of fun. It's been really awesome for me in particular, but for Jeff as well, just to kind of pass along the things that we've learned. Some of the hard knocks over the past 7 years for me, and for Jeff, the past 35, 40 years for him, and to really head off those mistakes so that these guys don't make the same mistakes. So that's the full-time crew, but we've got Jeff's daughter Brittany, my sister-in-law, who is she's in part-time as a designer, about 1 day a week. And then we've got just a slew of other non-employee trade partners, subcontractors that will come in and help us, everything from admin assistant to the actual work that's going on, carpenters, plumbers,
And we have
electricians,
Emily
HVAC.
too. We have Emily. She's sort of an admin assistant to me a little bit, and she does marketing as well. So
That's great. So for all the, for the actual construction work, it sounds like you're leveraging subcontractors for the most part. Sure. So I mean, obviously conflict is going to arise at times. How do you guys navigate that with, with kind of that close family ties, as well as, you gotta, hey, business is business at times. How do you deal with the tough conflict?
Fist fights?
Yeah.
Get it? Oh, yeah, yeah. Honestly, I get asked a lot when people ask, "Oh, you're in business with your father-in-law? Like, what's that like?" Oh, that's like bad, you know. And honestly, it's been awesome. I think Jeff and I have a really unique relationship. In that, we've gone through some hard stuff. Both personally, like just in life, not necessarily against each other. But also in business, we went through COVID together, weathered that storm. There's been a handful of tough clients amidst most were really have been really great over the past 7 years. But there's things that really tested and tried our relationship, and honestly, it's been forged in the fire. Where I can share with Jeff anything, and you can share the same with me. But we had the humility to say, yeah, you know what, we're going to listen to one another. Even just last week, we were out with a client, and Jeff said, yeah, Ryan, I think you need to change how you communicate this. That just wasn't the most helpful. I was like, yeah, you know what? He's right about that. I do need to change that, as opposed to being defensive or whatever. So I'm very thankful for that, because and as I look to the future, like we've been through stuff. So, it's like whatever the future holds, like I'm confident we'll work through it and figure it out. And that's really unique. I think with Jeff and I, 1 + 1 = 3. In so many ways, I think both of us realized we couldn't do this without the other. I would never start a business like Jeff did. Like, it's just not in my this is not Mario. And again, like we've talked about it before, just developing the systems and stuff, Jeff has needed help with that. So, at this point, I'm operating all that stuff. And we've seen it in productivity for our business. 1 + 1 = 3, really. Like, Jeff alone versus us together, like we can do far more together than we can alone. So anyway, Jeff, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
well, before the podcast started, you asked about how do you do work and how do you do family, and so 7 of the kids at that point, I think 4 were married, 4 were involved in the business either as subcontractors or working with me, and we went to the Outer Banks for a week, and we did not talk about business, 1 sentence the entire time. And our basic laws of the trade, if you will, is we don't talk about business after 5 on Fridays and before 6 on Sundays if we have to. And we just really kind of honor that and keep that because we need our downtime. Plus, we don't want to get smacked by our wives if we start talking around the dinner table at 2 o'clock on a Sunday. We start talking about it. But no, I mean, we've really have held to that pretty good. Um, so that's been a big success. And you know what? We keep short accounts too, right? And that's also a very important thing, not to let stuff fester.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I mean, that's great advice. My dad is our CFO here, so we have that similar kind of working relationship, family, and I've also gotten asked lots of what's it like working with your dad, and it's like, well, in the first company, it was kind of more maybe like the 80-20 rule. 80% of the time we're loving each other, 20% of the time we're kind of at odds, going for each other's jugular, but I'd say in this business, it's, 95, 98, percent. It's all great. I mean, obviously, we still have our disagreements at times, but I think we've really learned to, be able to work through those things, which is very helpful. And at the end of the day, we know that you just got to recognize that everyone has their own thoughts and opinions, and we're all passionate, and we just can't ever kind of let it get heated, or we just have to have that mutual level of respect for each other. And I'd say we're probably not nearly as good as y'all about when we get together on the weekends or for dinner or whatever. We definitely have a tendency to go to the business talk, and certainly know my wife and my mom don't always appreciate that, and so they'll usually give us a little nudge reminder, but it's
Well,
it's definitely, I mean,
time to turn a new
I,
leaf there, my friend. And one thing I'll
yeah,
say too is that I'll probably speak for your dad too. I bet, and I've never even met him, but having your son-in-law, your daughter-in-law, because my daughter-in-law, until she had 4 kids, she actually worked as a designer for me. But it's really a very humbling thing that your kids, son and daughter-in-law included, would actually want to work for you. I mean, I almost don't have words to even really describe what a blessing that is.
Yeah.
yeah, no, and I know he's just extremely proud, and it means a lot to both of us. I mean, again, I think life's too short to not spend it doing the things that you love with the people that you want to spend your time and be around. And I say that though with an understanding that, again, it doesn't work for everyone. And my wife at the very beginning of the job trade, she came in and was helping make cold calls and trying to kind of see what she could do to help out. And she, kind of, I don't know, a couple weeks in, she's like, Eric, just don't think this is my thing. Like, I really want to help you, but I don't know. And so I was like, look, no worries. I very much appreciated, the attempt, and the effort that she did put forth. But we understood that, hey, look, that's not the best use of your time. It's not, if you're not passionate about it, I don't want to, someone who doesn't, like, want to do that and be in that role. And so no harm, no foul. We kind of keep kind of doing our things. And I think it's important to make sure that you do, if you are going to go into business with your family, like, you've really thought about what are the boundaries, what are the lanes, what are the, when are we going to have work time versus family time. And we got to take vacations, we got to take breaks. Like, we can't just grind. And as entrepreneurs, we know, especially early on, I mean, that can very quickly consume your entire, all of your thoughts and your thinking and your time and your energies. And so it is important going into it, really making sure that you've got some sort of framework put in place for how are we going to manage this. And when things get tough, because it will, what is our way to kind of deal with those situations so that we don't end up, screwing the business and the marriage or the family or whatever it may be. That, I think, is the worst thing that could happen. I see a lot of people too, where it's, their spouse wants to help out with the books, and it's like, well, you better make sure they're qualified, and it's so much better to go get a bookkeeper who knows what they're doing. Even if someone's offering to help, if they are going to help, you got to put them in the right role and make sure that they can really, add value and not end up, kind of causing more challenges down the road, because I
Yeah.
see that all the time
Well,
too.
in from I had a extended family member work for me from 98 to '06, and he stole $600,000, and we almost went out of business. And the forensic accountant said, never have the same person open and enter the bills as pays the bills. And just as a word of advice to everybody, it's that's kind of important, in those roles to really have people that you trust.
Yeah. That's great advice, and I man, I hate hearing that, and it's like it's just such a it's so unfortunate, and I mean, the contractor that I first worked with, actually before I took over the construction company to build this, was an outdoor living, contractor, and she was just like working her tail off, and she kept, just she kept growing the top line revenue, but didn't understand why she wasn't making any money. She just kept selling jobs and over and over. And finally, when we started doing the job costing, I was like, what's happening here? Like, and we started kind of trying to track back. We found that basically her own crews were overbuying material at the hardware store, and then would basically go do the job and then take all the excess back, and they're returning it for store credit to a different store. And like, she just didn't have a handle on that. And it's like, hundreds of thousands of dollars just went out the door, and like she had no, accounting for weight. We way overbought. And so it's like, it ended up putting her in tremendous debt, and it's just such an unfortunate thing. And I think you're totally right. It's so important that you have kind of multiple people keeping an eye on the books and the finances.
Well, I mean, again, I don't know a lot about job tread, but I got the idea, the impression that from doing estimates and fat fingering something to someone else trying to steal something, job tread is sort of a firewall against some of
Yep.
that stuff.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I understand enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's so many people, though, they never take the time to, to analyze the job and the performance. And I mean, the job costing is such an important piece to make sure that everything is tracking back and is on the right jobs. Like, at the construction company, we found, when I started digging into their books, I mean, I found jobs where we were, double build, overbuild. We had materials on the wrong job. And, that's where I learned, again, like we had this disconnect between the back office and the accounting system, and what was actually happening in the field on the jobs. And it just, it was like death by a thousand cuts. And nobody realized it or saw it, because it was just so rampant that you just never would have known. And that's why it's so important, why we're so passionate about, like, you got to do the job costing. You got to analyze how did you perform on every job, and take that time, to meet with the team and say, hey, what went well? What didn't go well? Here's how we performed financially. Like, what could we do differently? What changes do we need to make? I mean, do you what you guys kind of close out, or kind of what do you guys do after every job?
So we took it from the Navy SEALs. It's called an after action review. I don't know if you've heard of that. But it's exactly what you're talking about. As the job closes out, here we go. Here's the numbers. Yeah, we're $1,000 in the red. Like, why? And we kind of have a culture of, hey, mistakes happen. It's an imperfect world. I mean, as we talked about before, we're not perfect, but let's try not to make the same mistake twice, right? So yeah, job tread's like super powerful for that. Before I was using spreadsheets and kind of manually entering stuff, and it took forever. And you add an extra zero somewhere. It's like, oh yeah, it's just it's awesome, the job trade system, once you get it up and running. Just the quick numbers that it gives you right away. And so that's been really helpful for us as a business to try to do things more efficiently, to learn from our mistakes, to estimate better for the next one. But yeah, that after action review, as a job closes out, is key for all of us.
Yeah, that's great. I'm curious, what do when you think about, goals for the team, whether it's your annual goal, monthly goals, like how do you guys go about kind of planning out, do you have an annual budget, and do you break it down into months? What do you do in that regard?
Yeah, so we've got an annual goal for this year, that we're working towards, and breaking it down each month. We've kind of got like a stretch goal. We're like, man, if we could reach this, that'd be awesome. Part of it's challenging for us this year, just because it's the first year we've got these new hires. So we're trying to just figure out how productive, how quickly will they kind of get up to speed on stuff. They're doing awesome, but we just have to have more time go by. But yeah, job tread's part of that. Just laying out the contracts that we have, the total approved price in there, and the profit that's involved.
Sure.
So
So
yeah.
how did you know, when you made that first hire, like how did you know that that was the right time to bring someone on? Because I see a lot of business owners struggle, that there's this fear of like, I don't know, am I going to be able to, make payroll? Like, can we afford to bring on another full-time person? Like, they as entrepreneurs, right? We all just want to put on the hat, and keep kind of doing it because we think, oh, we can do it the best ourselves. But like again, you can grow and scale the business a lot faster when you can build out a team. But it's like, how did you know that it was what you needed to do?
Fred.
Yeah, there you go.
Tell me about Fred.
Yeah, so Fred's our business coach. So that was one of the things in the succession plan. We realized we need somebody way more experienced and smarter than us in these things to kind of guide us through it. So I think it's a number of things. It's just kind of looking at hey, what's it going to cost us? Worst case scenario, right? We say we just need to break even, and Jeff and I are looking at hey, what can we do together versus what can we do if we add somebody else in, um, and I think the return on investment it just made sense. And I think too we needed help. It's sort of again we need to stay in our lanes. We need somebody that is going to be a really awesome kind of site project manager, face to face kind of person. Those things kind of tend to stress me out. I'm better in the office admin, stuff rather than on the site. Jeff is really great at it, but again, like best use of his time is not nitty gritty project management, but more bigger picture kind of stuff, right? So it's kind of those things of trying to again multiply our time, get you in the right lane, and most productive in the thing that you're best at, right? And I think it's things too of working really hard, after before I came on board, with the embezzlement and stuff, just making sure the business was in a healthy position, and it's awesome. And um, when we made the decision to hire these guys, we were in a good cash position, a good systems, good book of work, so those things are probably kind of go without saying, but those things were kind of in place. And then I think with our business coach help us to think big picture strategy, long term, it was kind of a no brainer for with both of these guys too. And I think when we met the one guy 2 years ago, we're like, oh man, like I feel like we're probably gonna hire him someday. Actually, he asked us first. Um, yeah, it was a little bit uh, slightly awkward, but it's actually fine. But he used to work for our plumber actually, and so he came onto our team. So our plumber again is a friend, like and it's all good. It was the best thing for Jeff to come over, but um, yeah, I think just realizing that these guys had that character that Jeff and I is part of who we are, part of who we are as a company, and that these guys would have the particular gifts are going to help to grow our company in the way that we want to. It was kind of a no brainer. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Jeff.
I think our business coach was really helpful because Ryan and I had done the DISC assessment test. And it's interesting because our letters were opposite our strengths and weaknesses. But so he had each of these two guys go through that. He actually interviewed them. And that was also helpful because we weren't just trusting our own instincts, but we wanted someone who really was impartial, who knew a lot about the business. And so that was very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so it sounds like it was a little bit of like you got to the point where it became a necessity and you're feeling kind of stressed and realize that again it's like these tasks that are continuing to pile up aren't the best use of our time. Maybe we need to bring in someone who can help, but like you also analyze the performance, the financials of the business. Like, is this a good time? Can we afford it? And then doing your due diligence and making sure that that was the right hire to bring on. Because I mean, just the wrong hire can be so much more costly than not making that move at all. And so it sounds like you had a lot of those things in place, and you didn't necessarily like rush into it, but you knew that you needed to make a move and needed to kind of grow the team. And it sounds like it's worked really well for you.
Yes, it's sort of like you can be at peace and be scared at the same time.
Yeah.
It was like, yeah, we know, we've done our due diligence in every way we could think of: financials, business coach, interviews, strengths, weaknesses, all that. So that's the peace part. But the scary part is, well, okay, they're family men. The one's got 3 kids, the other one's got 1 kid. They're married, and the, so that's sort of the scary part. But if you just listen to scary, you'll never take a step forward. You'll never get on that bike and take the training wheels off.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, with your first hire, I mean, obviously, you probably didn't have any sort of training or, hadn't done that or gone through that. So how did you kind of onboard them and what was that training process like and how long did it take them to really get up to speed and become productive?
Good question.
Well,
Go ahead, answer it.
it's taken Jeff 40 years and it's taken me 7 and we're still onboarding. So, um, no, yeah, honestly, that whole process has been really, really fun for me. I mean, I think I've always enjoyed, even thinking back to high school, like tutoring my math class, just loving teaching, training has just been part of my DNA. It's how my parents raised me as well. So getting to be a part of that's been great. Yeah, I mean, um, we really have designed it from the ground up. We've, sought advice from other people that have done it. Our business coach has been helpful there too, just because he's built and helped, as a coach build, dozens of businesses. So that's been helpful, just, asking the right questions. And yeah, just taking each step as it comes. I mean, I was joking about the 40 years of onboarding, but it really, I mean, Jeff and I, and Jeff will even say, I learn something new every week because
No,
of the
every
breadth
day. Every day.
or every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. The breadth of what we do, it's important to constantly be a learner, to know what you don't know. That's the biggest thing. It's when you're new, you don't know what you don't know. But whereas now after 7 years, I know pretty well what I don't know, and so then I know I need to find somebody that really does know and trust and rely on them. If I got a lighting design question, I probably know the answer, but I'm gonna talk to our lighting designer, and really make sure I'm set straight. And boy, I'm glad I did when I do that kind of thing.
I think your focus and understanding on, kind of process, is it can be very helpful as long as you take the time to say, okay, like, even though we don't have this all documented, like, you know you're bringing on one person, but like if you take the time to kind of really, document out everything that, that person would need to learn. And obviously you're not going to know everything going into it, but like as those things keep coming up, you keep kind of adding them, to this documentation so that that next person you bring on, hopefully you can do it a little bit faster and it's a little bit easier, and then that third person. And it's like, I think a lot of people I see don't, they hire someone and then they think they're just going to sort of learn by osmosis or they're just going to shadow them. And they don't take the time though, because I mean, obviously Fred has got a plethora of knowledge up in his head. But if that doesn't get out and translated into a form that can be coached and trained on, then it does. It makes it harder and it draws out that whole, let's get somebody up to speed and productive, because as soon as they can become productive for the business, the hope is that they're now, you know, paying for themselves, right? They're generating enough value where it's a no-brainer and we're growing, the business is improving and the cash flow, just because you're now paying out one more person, it's still, a net positive and a net gain for the business, but you got to get them up to speed. And I think it's important that you take the time, and invest. I mean, it's an investment up front and, along the way with every employee that you bring on. But, the better that you can kind of come up with a systemized approach to onboarding, I think it really helps, speed that whole process up.
Yeah,
Three,
oh, sorry, go ahead,
let's
Jeff.
say three really important things. Yeah, I mean, whoever's listening to this, no matter where you are with your business, one is we need to be good listeners. So that's to our clients, but it's to our employees, it's to our partners. Two, we need to be good teachers. Ryan is a really good teacher. He understands all the aspects of what it involves being a teacher. Three, be an encourager. I'm an encourager. And we've had our employees tell us that between a combination of his willingness to teach, patient, it's okay if you make a mistake, and then the encourager part has just really, I think, more than anything, has put a smile in our employees' hearts because they just love being here and we laugh a lot and we still get to work done. And I think it's because we've developed that culture that, in a sense, we teach each other because we learn from each other. You know, we all need encouragement. That's one thing with having all the kids. And if I went back, I would want to do this even more. It's just encouraging your kids with where they do well. And, every person on this planet needs that.
Yeah, such great advice there, Jeff. I couldn't agree more. I mean, how do you, with when you think about your broader team, including all your, your subs and vendors and everybody who's involved in, working with you all. I mean, what do you do to really try to foster that culture and that team building? Like, do you guys meet regularly? Do you have, events? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, internally as a team, we're meeting all the time. It's important that we have a really strong culture. It's been fun. One of our initiatives this quarter is to up our online presence. We've had a social media account. We're trying to make it better, more reflective of who we are. We're trying, more organic posts and reels and that kind of thing. But it's been a all hands on deck kind of thing. And yeah, just kind of making sure, we're actually tracking, face to face with our employees as well. And yeah, with our, vendors and trade partners, it's taking advantage of that sort of yeah, the added stuff outside of the work. So, it's on a job site actually being interested in caring, how somebody's doing. It's not just I'm not talking about having 2 hours of conversation with them, but so that they know that I actually care how our electrician's wife and kids are doing, on a day where there's a lot of craziness going on, Yum Yum Donuts are showing up, or coffee, or we're getting lunch for people. It's just, sort of these added touches of, that we care, and this is more than just cogs in a machine.
Yeah, I love that. I think again, buying your team food, giving them, just things like that. I mean, it's such a nominal expense, but it shows that you care. It shows that you really want them to be happy and to enjoy, working with you. And so I love those. I love those things. As we kind of, come here to a close, I'm curious, Ryan, like, you've been with the business for 7 years now. Is there, when you think back about what you know now, is there anything that, like, if you would have known everything that you know now and where you would have gotten to, is there anything that you would have done differently when you joined Jeff 7 years ago, and how do you think that would have affected you?
Oh man, so much. I mean, I probably would have. I mean, if I knew now back then, like I just would have done everything different. I mean, there's so much. I think Jeff would say the same thing as hindsight's 2020, right? So it's really be hard for me to distill, everything that I learned. But at the same time, the mistakes I made along the way, I went to school. And in some cases, it was a real expensive school, but it was a better school, to make a mistake than, I could ever received in a classroom. So yeah, it's really a hard question. What would I have done differently? There were, certain systems we tried to implement that didn't really work. So yeah, I wouldn't have done that. But again, I wouldn't have known unless I did it, right? So um, yeah, I mean, I think there's some, personal managing my own stress and whatnot, sort of having boundaries about stuff that, I've been historically pretty bad at, had periods of burnout at different points. I wish that wouldn't happen. Jeff paid the cost a little bit, had to be around me. I'm just, real negative and stuff at a handful of times over the past 7 years. But we got through it. And, it was humbling for me as well to realize, yeah, you know what? I need to rely on people around me. I need to be smart and wise, about things. I need to not let certain things get to me, you know?
So I'm curious, obviously Jeff has already stated, he's kind of got a goal here to be able to retire, in the next 10 years or so. I mean, what is your plan to, to replace Jeff, and how are you, because he's bringing a ton of, just value and everything that he does. I mean, he's kind of like the second half, second part of the brain, if you will, like, between the two of you. So what's the plan, when Jeff is ready to go out and retire and kind of be less active in the business? Like, how are you gonna kind of keep going and charging ahead?
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that, I've said a lot, over the past year, especially as we've been thinking about this, is that, replacing Jeff is kind of impossible. He's one of a kind. And so what we'll do and what our plan is to grow and replace parts of what he brings to the table. And as he decreases, certain things will increase. So, right now he's like the first person people talk to. He's the one that people meet with, our first kind of in-home meeting, and that role would shift, potentially to me, potentially to someone else. And so basically, we're taking all these hats that Jeff wears and kind of shifting them around somewhere else. Now we may try to hire a kind of a lead designer at some point. We may just shift the scope of what we do. A lot of what Jeff brings to the table is his interior design designation and just really the ability to do anything under the sun. Like, I mean, literally anything, we'll do it. And there's real value to that, that we bring. But, as the business grows and shifts, maybe we're honing into certain things or certain kinds of projects maybe we won't take, or maybe certain things that we have done in-house that, now, hey, we'll bring in somebody else to kind of handle or cover it. But yeah, it's really, trying to learn and download as much from him as we possibly can, for me and the rest of our team too. Jeff's very involved every day training, these new hires, just kind of imparting the stuff that he's learned. And, Lord willing, we're hoping that, at 78, he can still be involved. He can be an advisor. He can be a counselor. I anticipate, if he still wants to and still able to, like that, he's guiding me through the really difficult stuff as we do now.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jeff, my question to you here, wrapping up is, I mean, obviously you've seen a lot. You've already shared some really great, advice. I mean, is there anything, in particular, anything else that, you might encourage Ryan, when the time comes, like, is there anything that you want to make sure that, the business continues to do these things, but, maybe, is there some kind of larger goal? Where do you want the business to go even beyond you? I mean, obviously this is creating a family legacy for all of you, but, what are your aspirations, and what do you hope to see, when Ryan does take the full reins?
Well, I told Ryan that we can always, as I phase out, you can always stop doing the crazy. Keep it a little bit more simple. But the crazy is kind of what gets us some of our jobs too. Um, Jeff is very artistic. He's actually a pretty amazing illustrator. Um, I could see Jeff and my daughter Brittany, her two kids. By the time I'm out of here, she'd probably be able to work full time. She's really good. She's been doing design probably for 15 years already. So he's probably more concerned about it than I am when the time comes. And I have good health. If 78, I hope I'm moving around. I sure do. I could easily see myself working a couple half days a week and whatnot. And the thing is, because of just seriously job tread and some other systems, he's less stressed. It's affording me with these new hires to do more of what I love. So I'm not feeling really stressed. So, and one of the worst things on your body is when you feel stressed. So most of what I spent time doing is design and clients and some problem solving. And it doesn't even feel like work a lot of times. So as far as the long term, I don't think, I mean, my wife and I get along great, but I don't think she'd want me hanging around an extra 40 hours a week, that all 40 hours. She'd be glad if I was working. And I think it'd be good for me because it keeps your mind going. Motion is lotion, not just physically, but mentally too. So hey, I'm very blessed. I'm very thankful.
Man, well, look, guys, this has been just such an awesome time getting to talk to both of you, and truly hearing, how passionate you are about what you're doing, and it sounds like, you guys have really, built just an amazing vehicle for you to not only, work and make money, but I mean, it's what you want to be doing. It's what you're passionate about, and I think that's what life is all about, is finding that thing that you're truly passionate about, where you can wake up every day and you don't feel like it's just going to be another, beat down of a day and a grind. It's all about finding those things and those people that you want to spend your time with, and that you're excited, and that you're adding value, and you're helping your clients, and you're, just it's so neat to be able to see what you all are building together. And I have no doubt that, there will be a lot more success in your future, and that you're going to continue to build an incredible team, an incredible company. Your work is obviously top notch, and I think that just it comes from the leadership that both of you are providing to the business and to the clients, the subs, everyone that gets involved with you. And it always gets me excited to see, and be able to talk to people who truly have that heart. I think at the end of the day, I mean, behind every business is people. And when you put great people who really love and want to do the best possible job that they can, I mean, that is what creates a successful business, is when it's not just about, the dollars and cents. It's about the value. It's about, building people up, encouraging them, helping train and develop and create, leaders who will, one day, succeed you and be able to keep that going. And so it's just, I appreciate you guys coming on and sharing this. It's always awesome and unique to be able to kind of have that family, connection, but also, we're your business partners and you're working together. So, it's something that I appreciate it. I want to, to tell you guys, from the outside looking in, it just seems like you guys have built something really special, and I can't wait to see where you take it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on.
See you
you
next
guys.
year in Texas. Boom.
All right.
Right.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Builder Stories. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and gained valuable insights that can help you in your journey along the way. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and leave us a review. And as always, if you or someone you know has a story to share, please contact us at builderstories.com. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Eric Fortenberry, and remember, every builder has a unique story. Keep building yours.